What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name's Steve, and it is time to. Let's get a little bit excited here, huh? It is time. Draft season is upon us, and so today we'll be looking at drafting from the middle of your drafts. For a 12-team league, that's going to be drafting from picks 5 through 8. For a 10-team league, that's going to be picking from picks 4 through 7. We will be looking at both of those in this video. At times, we will be thinking about 2 wide receiver versus 3 wide receiver. That's also something that you can use yourself to judge these drafts, because we will be going through a bunch of drafts that I did in preparation to compare, contrast from drafting from each of these positions for both 12 and 10 team leagues. Use the timestamps if you want to jump to the 10 team league stuff once we get to the 12 team league. That's there for you to be able to zoom ahead with. In terms of some of the different strategies we will be looking at in this video, we'll be looking at zigging while the rest of the field zags and going with the flow. That's where I put these charts that you are looking at above me to use in this video, as well as some of the analysis that I will be going through before we get to the drafts. But in general, what you're looking at, you can see a lot more on in a video where I just went through the overall draft strategy, got into more detail. But for these, this is looking specifically at what players on average are being drafted from picks 5 through 8 in the first round. Same with the same, picks that the picks 5 through 8 would encounter in the second round. So it's not always going to be 4 players. You can see here as 3 players, here as 5 players. Whereas when I look at this via the ranking chart, we're looking at if the next 4 players would go via ADP, the next 4 highest after the top 4, it's going to be 2 wide receivers and 2 running backs on average, of course. This is a very specific scenario, so I do like to lean into this chart a little bit more. But I used them both and kind of ironed out the details to come up with a specific draft order that I followed, just to see on average what would your roster look like if you were heavily zigging while the rest of the field zagged, or if you were to go with what's most commonly done when drafting from these positions. And we will also be looking at hero running back versus zero running back draft styles. And actually for 10-team league, I did heavy running back, so going heavy running back early. I should have probably done one of those at least for the 12-team league. It just didn't work out like that. But before we get into general advice, real quick here, announcements. Every Thursday live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I've been going up here for you guys to help you get some live practice reps, as I like to call them. We've been drafting as a group on Sleeper. It's a free app that you can download, and I just send out the link in chat, and you can join right in. It's great. It's been really nice. It would be great to get a group with no computers in it, but we are drafting from the first round to the end round, so unlike those ESPN drafts and everything, you get some full practice, and you also get people trying different strategies and mixing things up, which I think helps you to be just all the bit stronger during draft season as you get prepared. In cohesion with that, the week leading up to Labor Day weekend, so like Sunday week, Labor Day weekend, including that Monday, I will be going live as much as possible because that's the most popular draft weekend. I'll be going live as much as possible in that time span, maybe once a day even, is ultimately the plan. So stay tuned for that. And if you are interested in becoming a channel member, getting more involved with the community, it's not expensive. And if you want more details on it, just go look at some of my player highlight videos, the David Njoku and the James Cook video. If you look at the timestamps, towards the last few minutes of the video, I go into a little bit more detail about what some of the perks are about becoming a member. So check that on out. Check out those player highlight videos. I think that they've been a fun, entertaining series. Now it's time for some general tips that I have learned through years of experience of drafting, as well as through some of the process of practicing for this video, doing the drafts for this video. Generally speaking, these rules all kind of tie into each other here. I got a set of 3, not rules, but pieces of advice. Number 1 is that you're most susceptible to runs, the draft not going as expected, and players falling that you could gobble up. Others drafting on the edges of the draft, picks 1 through 3 and 10 through 12 in those areas of the draft. Sometimes they're going to end up having to reach, which leaves value on the board for you to possibly scoop up because they're going to be too afraid of the next stretch of players at a position just leaving before they get a chance to even draft them because it takes so long for them to get back on the board. So these are the things that you want to keep an eye on. Number 2 is that you cannot afford to predict how the runs will or will not go. So going back to being susceptible to these runs, that's why. So don't be shy. Sometimes you might get a little bit cocky, like, oh, there's enough quarterbacks to make it to my next pick. But you don't have the advantage of drafting from those edge spots where it's like, okay, out of the 3 teams that are drafting, 2 of them have already picked their quarterbacks. We're still pretty early in the draft, too early to get a second quarterback. There's 2 quarterbacks that I like, so I'm fine. I will get one of those quarterbacks around the next turn, and right now I can take this this wide receiver that I love, etc. So one thing that you have to do from the middle portions of the draft is just don't be shy. Be willing to start the next run in order to get your quarterback or your tight end instead of being too patient. And the next category here is a little bit about practicing some patience, though. You can afford to be the most reactionary from the center of the draft. The most water or liquid, whatever the term is that somebody may use, I think you get the idea of that, is adaptability. So let the draft speak to you. Things will work themselves out. You will find someone at that position of need in due time. It will come to you. If you see a position getting ignored, don't expect that to continue. Take advantage of it now, not later, because you just might say, oh, well, there's probably enough to get around to me. And then they don't, because everybody freaks out and starts all of a sudden that what looked like a lot of running backs just gets swallowed up before your next turn. So I like to say from this middle portion of the draft is that you have to be aggressively patient, strike strategically, and look at the board, feel the board, because you can't statistically say, once again, when you're drafting from those edge spots, you can kind of look and say, well, hey, there's 4 players that are going to be taken. I like 5 of these wide receivers in this group, so I'm going to go ahead and take one of these running backs right now, or a different position than one of those 5 receivers that will make it to you no matter what around the next turn. Can't do things like that. So just be aggressive, but also, as always, just be as reactionary as possible. Aggressively reactionary. All right, now, this comes back to more looking at some of the via ADP, via draft, which is up on the website, www.theFFForge.com, where you can also find all my positional rankings, which are updated quite regularly at this point in the off season to see. And announcement, you can now download my overall draft rankings. My overall rankings are available as well. I don't really like overall rankings, but my bar sheet or whatever, or draft sheet where you can cross off players, it has, enough players to draft from at each position in one sheet for you on draft day. That is up on the website. You can download it and print it off. And, I hope that helps you out. I will be updating, if you're not in a rush, I will be updating that over the next 5 days or so. So keep, you won't be able to tell, but just, be a little bit patient, maybe come back to the website in 4 days from the release of this video, and for sure by then I will have updated that one more time to represent more of my rankings more closely. Now, when we look at some positional observations that I made while going through this information, for the running back position, it appears to me that you can be patient at running back through the 9th round at the very least, while drafting from this position of the draft. It also appears to be set up to be going hero running back was an observation I made, so we'll see how well that observation withstands the test of time, but I think you can see where I kind of end up making this observation on the running backs and practicing some patience with the running back position. There will be times in the draft where it should just make sense to take a running back, and you don't have to force that matter early on in the draft. Now, when we look at the tight end position, if Sam Laporta makes it to you in the 3rd round, I think that you should be jumping on that immediately. If that doesn't happen in the 5th or 6th round, you could, once again, you could get a little bit lucky here with a tight end falling to you. Is not 100% expected. Who you can expect to be there would be like George Kittle and Kyle Pitts. So if you like them, there you go. I suggest passing on them. I don't think they're like, especially if you're looking for value drafting, I don't think they're really of value at that point. But if you are comfortable with like Jake Ferguson or David Njoku, then you are in a perfect spot while drafting from the middle of this draft in order to get one of them in the 9th round. So that works out very nicely. I will say from experience, you do have to be careful to make sure that if one of these situations does happen, I'd say more often than not, it's going to look better if you do jump on the tight ends that are falling instead of waiting even for Ferguson, even if you're comfortable for a Ferguson. You can miss out on everything if you're holding out for specifically one of Jake Ferguson or David Njoku. Are you comfortable with someone else late or not? That should help to determine how aggressive you want to be about getting one of those earlier tight ends as well. Of course, that's kind of common sense. Then we look at the wide receiver position. The wide receivers will be looking good for you from drafting from the middle of the draft quite regularly. I think that you are going to be wanting to plan on getting like 3 in the first 4 rounds of the draft, 3 wide receivers. That should be strongly considered if you're drafting from the middle of the draft, in my opinion. And we'll see how that works out in terms of the drafts that I like or not. And then for the quarterback position, if you can get yourself a few targets that you're happy with in each tier of the quarterback, one of your targets should fall to you naturally. I tend to see at some point even more naturally than the tight ends. The tight ends, I was saying, like you get a little bit lucky if this happens, then pick up those tight ends. Quarterback, it doesn't take so much luck. At one point, you should see one of these guys fall to you. There are 2 primary areas where I think that you'll be finding the most value of guys falling into your lap. So that's the first is in that 4th to 5th round. The guys in the 4th round, speaking of Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, and in the 5th round, speaking of guys like Richardson and CJ Stroud. The second pass is going to be from the 9th all the way through the 11th round. That's going to be anywhere from Caleb Williams to Matt Stafford going in that area, and some of these guys might even fall further than that you can get. But for sure, you can get into that tier if you're comfortable with those guys, which, I mean, Matt Stafford definitely might be able to compete with the quarterback 7 on a week in and week out basis without too much hesitation. So now it's time to get on to the drafts. We will be comparing, contrasting, declaring winners until we come up with the ultimate best draft strategy pick spot for the 12-team leagues, and then we'll follow that up doing a similar same thing for the 10-team leagues. All right, so not everything's going to be perfectly centered, me with some headings up there and everything, but I'm not going to be covering anything right in the middle here, so we're just going to settle for this a little bit inexact. I'm sorry if that bothers you when it comes up, and now that I pointed it out, you will be sure to see some slight off-centering, but we're going to start out by looking at a couple of zigzag drafts. Once again, looking at 12-team leagues here. And in this first comparison, you can see the positions that I had to draft at each point. I ended up, after going through those charts that I had up on the screen before, coming to the zigzag method of going running back in the first round here, a wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, running back, wide receiver there, DST, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver to finish things off there at the end. So how does this end up looking out? We'll just get right out of the gate. Not my favorite drafts here, but I am taking the highest ADP player, which means that I'm not always going to. In some of these instances, there were players available that I just would have liked more. So try not to hold that up against the specific players as well. Try and think of some of the other players that are typically available around that time. But most commonly, this is the player that the average person would have taken. So we start off with Breece Hall in both situations, picking from pick 5 and pick 7, just to see a little bit of variation, get ourselves the best representation of going zigzags to compete against some of the other styles. And in this situation, when I picked from pick 5, I felt that I wrote a little note that I said that I think that I would like the pick 7 zigzag more, and probably even more true going from pick 8. So I just felt that this was a little bit like the zigzag method would work better from the later rounds. And I tend to agree with that, going running back first. I think the later you are in the first round, the more those running backs look appealing to you. There's a nice, hefty group of wide receivers that easily could be targeted ahead of some of the guys like Breece Hall that are usually still available, even up to Amon-Ra St. Brown, depending on how you feel about a couple of those last wide receivers in that first tier that go off the board. Pretty much the same for the first 2 rounds start there. Henry, Pacheco, still looking very similar in both of these cases throughout, which makes some sense. So it really comes down to which one do I like better. I don't know. I mean, it's close. I ended up going with pick 5 to represent the zigzag, but once again, not in total love with either one of those. So now let's look at over on this side of me now going with the flow. And this just means drafting the player that typically from a position that typically gets drafted. It's not a 100% thing, especially there actually wasn't a whole lot of straight up flow going on, but what I came to for this was wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. You can see that start in either one of these, and then quarterback or running back in the 4th round, and then 3 rounds later, so 5th, 7th round, quarterback or running back that round. So you can see I flipped that in each of these cases, hopefully based on the board that was in front of me. And then I know in one of these, from pick 6, I flipped quarterback and tight end in rounds 11 and 12. So I got my backup quarterback. Yeah, so that was just, I do have quarterback, tight end, rounds 11, 12. Just based on the board, what I was seeing, I knew, that I could get, I guess, a Kirk Cousins or somebody likable around, coming around to my next turn. But I felt like I needed to get Pat Freiermuth there first off the board, which going with the flow here didn't end up having us take tight end until very late, so that was part of that thing. Interesting that there was no real consensus on when to draft a tight end when going with the flow here from the middle portion of the draft, but that is how it worked out. And so with this, obviously I think going with the flow going to be more of a 3 wide receiver, going to be more of a strategy that you should probably like more if you're in 3 wide receiver compared to somebody who's in a 2 wide receiver, just because we are going so wide receiver heavy so early on. So that makes sense, filling out 3 wide receivers plus your flex and a backup in the first 5 rounds here. So let's just start, the wide receivers themselves are going to be pretty similar in each case between picking from pick 6 and 8. But out of the groups, which one do I prefer? I think that goes to pick 8 by a little ways, and that's probably going to go a long ways towards declaring the winner of this group. Look at the quarterback situation. I do think we have a clear leader here once again from pick 8. Running back situation, pick 6, going to get the nod there with James Cook over Tony Pollard, who was just announced to be in a which I think this was expected, lead running back role with Tyjae Spears. That's pretty much how I have him, projected. So no real surprise there, but the upside of Tony Pollard now is, he's not going to be climbing up drafts with that kind of information. So as a unit 2, we'll still stick with the quarterbacks here. The running backs, as a unit, I would actually feel like I got a few more guys with pick 8. But once again, from pick 8, some of these guys you might be able to get in either scenario. We're just 2 picks apart. So, it's close to a tie there, and the tight ends are close to a tie, a little bit of an advantage towards pick 6. All in all, though, I would rather have an advantage at quarterback. So if we're just looking at that, we're not even taking into account that I liked the wide receiver group from pick 8 a little bit better. We're going to go with that pick 8 group. Noah Fant, Jelani Woods, 2 sleepers that I have quite a bit of faith in, full PPR, more faith in Noah Fant, and, standard scoring, more faith in Woods, half PPR, kind of closer to one another. Still Fant, I like more than Jelani Woods. Obviously, Jelani Woods, though, really high upside potential. if things were to go well. I'll take my shot at figuring out this tight end position. Something I was more comfortable with in previous years, not because of the individuals that I can find late this year, just because of that fatter group of starters. That's going to bring us on to comparing. I should have taken the confetti off here. Pick 5 and pick 8, and between the two, we get obvious running back advantage with pick 5, the zigzag method. But if we're looking at, especially if we're looking at this from like a 3 wide receiver aspect, that's clearly going to be pick 8. I really like the wide receiver group in pick 8. I think we've got even flex. I prefer the flex here, more upside with the wide receiver flex than a running back flex, which we'll almost certainly be looking at. The wide receiver room there, pick 5, even for 2 wide receiver, not my favorite. And I think we can figure it out with the running backs. And if there's a position, this is why 0 RB is a legitimate strategy. If there's a position that you can figure out as the season goes along, for the exact same reason that you might be weary of picking running backs early, they get injured a lot, which means that there's a lot of replacements throughout the season. So for me, that is going to be the winner there. Pick 8, going with the flow. And this has been generally something I've said. I'm a big like zig while your opponents zag type of guy in the drafts. But this year, I really think that you miss out on too much with the wide receivers if you zig too far. And considering that this was a complete zig, that's too much. Zigging here or there, of course. And especially going with the flow, especially if that means zigging, it all works out. But that was just a little bit too much. But we also have the hero running back versus 0 running back. So here are our 2 contestants for the hero running backs going from picks 5 and 7. Interestingly, no notes from me here that I wrote. So, the running back room starts similar. Wide receiver, pick 2 there, starts similar enough if, we can assume that if Chris Olave is available here the second round for pick 5, he was probably available there for pick 7, which I would take Olave over Harrison, but either way, you get to see who's kind of available. Mike Evans, Neighbors, Kupp, Tank Dell. I feel full PPR. I'm going to feel a little bit more comfortable with this Harrison, Evans, Neighbors group than Olave, Kupp, Tank Dell, mostly because of Tank Dell, but not a huge reduction there. 2 wide receiver, perfectly fine with this pick 5 group, especially. I'm okay with it 3 wide receiver. I mean, I've still got my 3 wide receivers. Our running back, we can find a flex there, but we're a little bit more thin, I think, at the flex and in a 3 wide receiver specifically situation there. Whereas pick 7, going to feel a little bit better about 3 wide receiver, going to feel a little bit better about that flex in the 3 wide receiver position, just getting more running backs and wide receivers early there, whereas pick 5, we do get a clear advantage at quarterback, a big advantage. So that's good. And tight end wise, I think that we can potentially hold up to Dalton Kincaid with Jake Ferguson. That's why I like him as a late round target. So edge goes to pick 7, but I'm not like, oh darn, I'm for sure going to lose this matchup if I have Jake Ferguson going up against Dalton Kincaid going into any given week. I don't think that's going to be my feeling. Running backs for pick 5, I can get by with that. I like it. Pick 7, I actually don't like as much. So that's a true. Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't know which one. I just pressed it. I would have, if it was pick 7, I would have had to look a little bit more, speak a little bit about it. But I think it was pretty clear that in a lot of situations, pick 5, I'm going to go with a little bit, little less confident once again in a 3 wide receiver situation, but for sure for a 2 wide receiver situation, I'm good there. That's going to bring us on to the 0 running back situation here, going 0 RB. As you can see with pick 8, I did push the limits of 0 RB by taking a running back in the 4th round, but by definition of the creator of 0 RB, that is still 0 RB, and this is just an instance of, I'm sure, going with the flow. A couple of notes here from pick 6. I wanted to try a true waiting until the 6th round for a running back. And I believe this is actually a 7th round pick because of what's there in the 6th round potentially. if some guys get taken a little bit earlier than you expect. Going into this draft, I did write that I was thinking about a 3 wide receiver setup. The plan from pick 8 being to modify it to taking an earlier running back, but still fading quarterback and tight end. I'm hoping that James Cooks makes it into the 4th round, which he did in order to pull that strategy off from pick 8. So pick 6, we'll just go through quick there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta there in the 2nd round. Then Nico Collins, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk to fill out this wide receiver room / be my number 1 flex option. And we get Anthony Richardson in there. So nice, strong wide receivers. We get our flex nice and early, and we fill out our quarterback and our tight end. So obviously, I just took one running back or one wide receiver down the stretch there, and Romeo Doubs, upside guy for injury weeks and whatnot, and took all the shots in the world to figure it out. This is, a true 0 RB approach here at the running back position. I like getting Chubb in this kind of situation, given the amount of running backs that I'm going to find, given this talent that you can still find late. I still have starters here between Najee Harris and Austin Eckler, maybe J.K. Dobbins, and then we got 3 guys that we're waiting on injuries for, and Nick Chubb. So, yeah, a little bit thin here, but we can always go and find somebody for that RB2 spot, if nothing else, and if things do not go our way. So we're working thin early on in the season. Hopefully we can get by without too many injuries, especially to like Najee and Eckler there. Don't love this, but I do really think that that's a strong start that's going to give us an advantage across most of our roster. And if Najee Harris and Austin Eckler can be what ultimately they can be, then we're in a really good position to win a lot of games and early. From pick 8, do have some notes here. Depending on how much you agree with ADP, it's probably not going to make sense from this late in the draft to take a wide receiver in the 2nd round. Running back would probably make more sense to get taken at this point in the 2nd round, I think. But I would have taken Zamir White with that 6th round pick. So, yes, Zamir White was still available in the 6th round here. I would have taken him over DeAndre Swift, but I just followed ADP on that one. Otherwise, looking at the wide receiver room here, 3 wide receiver, we'll just do a 3 wide receiver comparison, which one's better for that kind of format. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Mike Evans. Obviously we're good for a 3 wide receiver set, and then Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson to hold that up. So now we do have a competition that we are leaving open for the running backs to enter at the flex. So let's see if we can't get 2 running backs and a flex. We got James Cook, I think Zamir White for my RB2, Mostert for my flex, who is an RB1, Chase Brown, who might not be an RB1, but I do think because of receiving work, I do think there's a good chance that even if he's not RB1, I think there's a decent chance that he becomes the RB1 at some point in the season. B, I think that even if he never gets that, I think there will be enough receiving work and enough work in general, closer to a split of workload, that I think Chase Brown has a good chance of being the better fantasy back in that backfield. So I think he's a solid backup there to work with Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson, and Demario Douglas is kind of like my Ladd McConkey backup. McConkey being what I suspect should be a fairly high reception total kind of guy, high floor, maybe not a high ceiling. Douglas, same idea. So I like that. I like Christian Watson just taking a shot here at high upside. If we lose Amon-Ra St. Brown, hey, maybe Christian Watson can get us that ceiling that Amon-Ra St. Brown had with a little bit of luck. So, and I really like the backups here. I'm thinking I would have chosen this pick 8 here, but we'll see. Let's see. I would feel more comfortable with pick 8 going into, So now we contrast hero running back versus 0 running back between the 2. Tight end position, Pat Freiermuth, just kind of, if Jake Ferguson is a little bit disappointing, Pat Freiermuth, I think, could easily compete with that with a little bit of luck. Pittsburgh, it's going to go one way or the other with Pat Freiermuth, depending on the quarterback. And I think if we get Justin Fields, much better chance that Pat Freiermuth will be successful compared to if we get Russell Wilson, more question marks there. So that's kind of close to a possible split. Edge goes to the hero running back there. Quarterback position, edge goes to the quarterback. Did I say quarterback for Jake Ferguson? Edge goes to Jake Ferguson, but very close. And it's the same thing here. Lamar Jackson, edge over Anthony Richardson, but very close for the value. So did we make up for that in other areas? James Cook over Zamir White. Slight, but Breece Hall over Cook. Advantage Breece Hall, RB2 spot. Zamir White in both situations. Raheem Mostert for a flex if need be in both situations. Equal there. Chase Brown. I like Jalen Wright, Ray Davis a little bit more than Ray Davis, Tyrone Tracy. So edge goes to pick 5 there again. Wide receiver room. Amon St. Brown, Chris Olave. I think a clear winner in Amon St. Brown. With a little bit of luck, Chris Olave, if he's everything that I think he could be, could reach those charts. But I also have Chris Olave on that one. And then Chris Olave versus Cooper Kupp. A little bit of luck. Cooper Kupp could compete with Chris Olave. And Tank Dell, Mike Evans. A little bit of luck, same thing. But edge each time at wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. So, the end of the day, I ended up picking pick 5 here. And I think that makes sense. That makes sense as much as I really do also like pick 8, the 0 running back there. In fact, to me, I think that might be better than this going with the flow roster. And it was technically a 0 RB, which they're both 0 RB. So just going to point that out here. But for the championship here, hero running back versus going with the flow, it came down to what kind of draft is this? I could not choose between the two. These are co-champions for me. I was looking at a 3 wide receiver draft. Then I liked going with the flow here. Including, I liked 0 RB is essentially what it is for a 3 wide receiver set, and for full PPR as well, because wide receivers are all the more important in that kind of setup. And then when we look at a 2 wide receiver half PPR setup, I preferred the pick 5. Not that couldn't work out in a 3 wide receiver setup, but I felt that we can figure it out with the running backs, the advantage that we're getting with that 3rd wide receiver, the advantage that we're getting with having a wide receiver in our flex spot, just a little bit stronger. But once again, I think I liked that 0 RB just a little bit more in terms of a 3 wide receiver as well, so than this one that's on the screen. So either way, co-champions here, hero running back, 0 running back, kind of won out the day, or going with the flow, hero running back. And generally getting 1 running back here a little bit earlier, I think works just a little bit better. All right, so that's going to bring us on to 10-team drafts. We're going to start off with, from pick 4, going with the flow. And for this, with the flow, I didn't have those same charts that I did for the 12-team league. What I did is I just took the top player via ADP that at least made sense. You know, if it would have been a wide receiver 8 times in a row, I went to taking 8 wide receivers in a row. But for the most part, just taking the top ADP, and because I wanted these rosters to look good to my personal tastes, if there's a very close call via ADP between 2 players and I had a preference, I was willing to take the guy who was a couple of spots lower in ADP. So in this instance, from pick 4, we got Tyreek Hill. Then we went running back there with Jonathan Taylor, followed by Sam Laporta, Hurts, Smith, Higgins, Swift, Mostert. So running backs we like, wide receivers we like. This is like a 2 wide receiver kind of setup. I like this a lot, getting that. I think you can afford to get a tight end and a quarterback early if you're in a 2 wide receiver league, is what I would say here. Like those backup wide receivers. Zeke Elliott might end up never getting used, but in case of emergency, in case Mostert, I don't know, just in case of emergency here, he'll work. Should be the starting running back for Dallas to just give us a floor if, Chase Brown's a bust, etc. So I like that depth in both situations, running back and wide receiver. And went off and got 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks here, so you can see if you're a person who likes to do that, how that worked out. I think that worked out brilliantly. Jalen Hurts and Matt Stafford should be great. Sam Laporta, Jake Ferguson should be great. there might be weeks where, in case of emergency, I would be okay with putting Jake Ferguson, 2 tight end sets there, filling out my flex with a tight end. It's not what I want to do, but just if Zeke Elliott's my running back too, then I might be in a situation where I got to put Ferguson in at that flex spot. My wide receivers are also running thin that particular week. But let's compare that to putting this more into something that I would draft. We got Jamar Chase, Barkley falling there was, not something that we should expect, but that's great. Same with Jonathan Taylor falling there. In both those situations, we got a running back that falls a little ways. 12-team league, I think, would never happen. 10-team league, I say still unlikely, but it happened in each of these cases. And part of the reason that I wanted to redo this pick 4 with the flow, which, by the way, I just randomly assigned each pick with a draft style for the 10-team league. Right now we're doing from pick 4, going with the flow. I wanted to see if Laporta didn't make it there in the 3rd round, if I'm happy to wait at the tight end. Well, once again, Laporta made it to the 3rd round. That's actually like his ADP is pick 4, 3rd round, 24, I think that was, right? So I did one more draft with that, but then we went ahead and got running back, hold off on that quarterback, which I'm fine doing, so I like that. And still got just as good a depth, I think, at wide receiver, but a better RB2. So I like pick 4 1.0 stronger there right out of the gate. So that is the winner. And then comparing that to pick 4 2.0, wanted to see if we did actually hold off at tight end and quarterback. Would I like it more? And so Chase, this time we actually can expect this running back to make it around that corner. Around to us in the 2nd round. Then Nico Pittman, Cook, so a little bit stronger wide receiver room there, and running back room is relatively the same. But we got Michael Pittman instead of Cook around later there. Dalton Kincaid falls to us. That works out nicely, and we get Kyler Murray, the last of that tier of somewhat comfortable first guys. Running back room, feel good about. We backed up Williams with Corum, and we backed up Mostert with Jalen Wright, and we backed up Cook with Davis. A very interesting strategy there, and getting all those backups. And I did end up liking this roster more, but I gotta say, it was very close. Regardless, this is our champion from pick 4, going with the flow. So let's bring up some contestants. Looking over to this side of me now are going to be the new drafts. And from pick 5, we went Hero RB. I was treating this as if it was a 3 wide receiver full PPR draft, specifically going in here, so keep that in mind. And I took a shot at Saquon making it around to me at pick 2. I had to settle for Kyren Williams. I think it was worth it, but since Tyreek Hill was still available. Since this was a Hero RB, the plan was probably to take running back with the 5th, but Tyreek Hill being there at pick 5 just made sense. And like I said, I was hoping Saquon would make it all the way around, but Kyren Williams right at the back end there of guys who I'd still take. So we were able to squeeze in Hero RB, just going RB in the 2nd round. I would prefer getting him in the 1st round, but 10-team league here, it's okay. You're still going to get something pretty strong there to lead your running back room. Then we got Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp for our wide receivers. We get Trey McBride in the middle there. Our quarterback room looks something like I'm comfortable with it looking. Running back room after our first 2, Mostert, Eckler, Corman, Wright backing up Mostert, and Kyren Williams there. So somewhat similar to our pick 4 in terms of that, but with James Conner in addition there. So that's nice. I feel real comfortable with the running backs. I think I can fill up a flex if need be. But so that's, we're going to compare this to looking at 3 wide receiver. And our wide receiver room, I think, is comparable. So this is going to be a close call. Which one did we go with? I ended up going pick 4 would be my 2 wide receiver. Pick 5, Hero RB would be my 3 wide receiver. I prefer that group, maybe full PPR a little bit. But I ended up sticking with pick 4 here as my slight favorite. So now we're going to be thinking in terms of 2 wide receiver setups. Because obviously pick 4 for 3 wide receiver, very thin at wide receiver there. So with pick 6, I went heavy running back. Get running backs quick and early, and and fade the wide receiver position, maybe the quarterback, maybe the tight end as well to some extent. And here we got Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor to start off with. That's bomb. That's great from pick 6. That works out nicely a little bit later. It makes it a little bit easier for some of those real high-end running backs to possibly fall to you. And then we get Chris Olave in the 3rd round, which you know I love. And then James Cook, who's my guy there in the 4th round, strong. And we got him in the other draft as well there. So now it's going to be, can Chris Olave keep up with Jamar Chase? Well, probably not. But I do think that there's a chance that he can be within striking distance, that maybe we can make it up by having Breece Hall as our RB1, JT as our RB2, and James Cook as our flex possibility / just extra depth there. T. Higgins versus Nico Collins, most likely that's going to go to Nico. Keenan Allen versus Pittman, most likely going to go to Pittman, but I could see a world where Keenan Allen, T. Higgins have very similar years week in and week out. Who's going to be the better one? I don't know at wide receiver there. So there's some competition at wide receiver, like the quarterback for pick 6, heavy running back a little bit more. Running back, we solidify that depth very strongly. And for the wide receiver spot, we're thinking 2 wide receivers, so we already have our backup in Keenan Allen. We already have our flex. We don't need Keenan to be our flex. Keenan might even be better than T. Higgins. Either one of those is our wide receiver 2. But Rashee Rice, I think, could be a wide receiver 2 and be fine. And then we took a couple of upside shots, and Mitchell and Richardson there as a duo, quarterback-wide receiver duo stack. So not shabby. Which route did we go? Stuck with pick 4? No. Kept the heavy running back is still up in here for competition. Pick 7, 0 RB. Comes off strong with the wide receivers there. Chase, Harrison, Evans. Then we got Lamar Jackson, Andrews, stacked. Some of the best at their positions. So that's nice and strong. Aaron Jones, Ramondre, Eckler, Chase Brown, J.K. Dobbins for running back. We could piece this together. We definitely have 2 starting running backs in there. So we do have viable starting running backs. Are we thinking about a 2 wide receiver league? We don't, our wide receiver 3 is set. So this is a strong 2 wide receiver. 3 wide receiver, I start to get a little bit concerned. But, Jaden Reed, Brown, and we still got our quarterback and our tight end in there. We have a backup quarterback tight end as well, and that's something I typically do. Very strong roster. I ended up going co-champions here between pick 6 and pick 4. Heavy running back, held strong here, especially for a 2 wide receiver, 3 wide receiver, full PPR. Questionable, not going to love that so much, but going with the flow here, pick 4, getting those wide receivers early, pushing off, but still attacking those early-ish tight end and quarterback tiers, but getting in at the end of them, allowing us to still get a couple of strong running backs. I think works out very nicely as well. I will point out for this heavy running back roster, Anthony Richardson could have been CJ Stroud. He was available there as well. And what I do like about this strategy is I've used it many times over the years, and it can be really nice not having to fight on the waiver wire each and every week for the next running back. A lot of times the next running back too is an unsure thing until we find out which one it is. Like there'll be 3 guys a lot of weeks that it's like, it's one of these 2 for this team and this guy. And then 2 out of 3 of them are duds, and like the one that survived was actually the one that was the lowest on most people's waiver priorities out of that group. That happens a lot, even though those wide receivers running backs are very readily available. At least you're not having to go out on a limb and just like throw some guys out there. And by going really heavy at the running back spot, I don't know how well this works in 10 team, but I know in 12 team, you can really put some, like, especially through the bye weeks and everything, you can come up to get opponents where your 5th running back is better than their, your Chase Brown in this instance, is much better than theirs, to the extreme that you're looking at, like, where both your running back 1 and 2 have ceilings of, like, 20 fantasy points here. Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, okay? So ceilings of, like, 20 fantasy points, while your opponent has a guy who has, like, a ceiling of, like, 8 fantasy points, meaning they're probably going to get, like, 4 fantasy points from that, those RB1 and 2 spots, where you're looking at getting, some combination of, like, 25 at a minimum. That's a nice lead that you get yourself on a weekly basis, or not on every week basis, but in a few matchups throughout this year. So, yeah, dominating the running back room. And then even just, time to time throughout the year, don't let that strength go away. Take up one of the running backs that's sitting out on the waiver wire that has some potential, if you have the room for it, so that way somebody else can't do it, and just put a little extra strain on the running back position. All right, that is it for all of these. I'm going to have to edit this down a fair bit, so sorry if it was a little bit jumpy, but I hope you learned a lot. Let me know in the comments what you like, what you don't like from drafting from these middle spots of your draft. Let others know any tips, tricks that you figured out that seem to be working for you this offseason if you're drafting from in this range. All right, that's it. Peace out.